You're hatching from an egg deep inside a hollowed-out palm tree. Your beak works instinctively, chipping away at the shell that's kept you safe for the past month. The world outside is nothing but muffled sounds and vibrations, but something inside tells you it's time to break free. Your siblings are doing the same around you, pushing and pecking their way out. Some hatch before you, already stretching their tiny wings and calling out with weak, raspy voices. Others are still struggling, their beaks barely making cracks in the surface. You push harder, using every bit of strength in your small body. The shell gives way, and suddenly you're out, wet and exhausted, lying in a nest made of wood chips and soft plant fibers. You can't see much yet. Your eyes are barely open, and everything is blurry. But you can feel the warmth of your mother above you, her massive red and blue feathers creating a canopy of protection. Your father is nearby too, his deep calls echoing through the hollow space. You're hungry. That's the first real sensation that hits you after the relief of being out of the egg. Your mouth opens automatically, and you call out with a sound that's more of a squeak than anything else. Your mother responds immediately, leaning down to feed you. The food is warm and soft, already processed in her crop before being passed to you. It's not much to look at, but it's exactly what you need. Your siblings are doing the same, all of you competing for attention and food. The nest is cramped. There are 4 of you total, and the space inside the palm tree cavity isn't exactly spacious. You push against your siblings, trying to get closer to your parents when they bring food. It's not personal, it's survival. The stronger you are, the more food you get. The more food you get, the better your chances of making it past the first few weeks. Your parents take turns leaving the nest. One stays behind to keep you warm and protected, while the other flies out to find food. When they return, they bring back seeds, fruits, and nuts that they've cracked open or softened for you. Sometimes they bring back clay, which seems strange, but you eat it anyway. You don't know it yet, but that clay is helping neutralize toxins from some of the fruits they feed you. Your body needs it, even if you don't understand why. The days blur together. Eat, sleep, grow, repeat. Your feathers start coming in, first as tiny pin-like structures, then slowly unfurling into the brilliant colors that will define you for the rest of your life. Red dominates your wings and back, while blue and yellow accent your flight feathers. You're going to be stunning, but right now you just look like a scruffy, half-bald chick with patches of colorful fuzz. Your vision improves over the weeks. The blurry shapes become clearer, and you start to make sense of your surroundings. The nest cavity is larger than you initially thought, carved out naturally by the palm tree's growth and possibly enlarged by previous occupants. Light filters in through the entrance, showing glimpses of green leaves and blue sky beyond. Sometimes shadows pass by, other birds maybe, or your parents returning with food. One of your siblings isn't doing well. It hatched last and has been smaller and weaker from the start. It struggles to compete for food, often getting pushed aside when your parents arrive with meals. You don't think about it much. You're too focused on your own survival, but over the course of a few days, it gets quieter and moves less. One morning, it doesn't move at all. Your parents remove the body without ceremony, carrying it away from the nest. Life goes on. Now there are 3 of you, and the competition is still fierce. You've grown larger and stronger, your calls louder and more demanding. When your parents approach the nest entrance, you crane your neck forward, mouth wide open, wings flapping frantically to get their attention. Sometimes it works, sometimes one of your siblings beats you to it, but you're learning to be more aggressive, more persistent. See what's cute. Your parents are incredibly dedicated. They make multiple trips each day, sometimes flying miles to find the right food. They know which fruits are ripe, which trees have the best nuts, and where to find the clay deposits that keep you healthy. They work from dawn until dusk, barely resting between feeding sessions. It's exhausting work, but they never stop. As you grow, your appetite becomes enormous. What started as small portions of soft food has turned into constant demands for more. You're nearly the size of your parents now, but you're still completely dependent on them. Your wings are developing, covered in the brilliant feathers that mark you as a macaw, but they're not strong enough for flight yet. You can flap them and create quite a commotion, but you're grounded for now. The nest is getting crowded. Three nearly full grown macaws in a space that was comfortable for hatchlings is becoming problematic. You and your siblings bump into each other constantly, competing for the best positions near the entrance where food arrives. Sometimes minor squabbles break out. Nothing serious, just pushing and the occasional nip with your beak. But the tension is building. Your parents start spending less time in the nest. They still bring food regularly, but they don't linger to keep you warm anymore. You're big enough to regulate your own body temperature, and frankly, there's no room for them anyway. They perch outside the entrance, calling to you and your siblings, encouraging you to come closer to the opening. This is when you get your first real look at the world outside. The forest stretches endlessly in every direction, a sea of green canopy broken by rivers and clearings. Other birds fly past, toucans with their massive beaks, smaller parrots in flocks, hawks circling high above. The sounds are incredible, calls and songs from dozens of species, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant crash of water over rocks. It's both exciting and terrifying. Out there is freedom, adventure, everything you'll need to survive as an adult macaw. But it's also dangerous, full of predators and challenges you can't even imagine yet. For now, you're content to peer out from the safety of your nest, watching and learning. Your parents become more insistent about encouraging you toward the entrance. They land just outside, calling to you with specific vocalizations you're starting to recognize. These aren't just random sounds, they're communications, lessons in the language you'll need to survive. You try to mimic them, your voice cracking and breaking as you attempt to match their complex calls. One day, your mother doesn't bring food to the nest entrance. Instead, she lands on a branch several feet away, holding a piece of fruit in her beak. She calls to you, clearly expecting you to come get it. You stretch toward her, but you can't reach from inside the cavity. Your siblings are doing the same, all of you calling frantically for her to come closer. She doesn't budge. This goes on for what feels like hours, your hunger growing stronger, your calls becoming more desperate. Finally, one of your siblings makes the leap. It scrambles to the edge of the entrance, wings flapping wildly, and launches itself toward the branch where your mother waits. The landing is graceless, more of a controlled crash than anything elegant. But it works. Your sibling gets the food. Now you understand. It's time to leave the nest, whether you're ready or not. Your parents aren't going to make it easy anymore. If you want to eat, you're going to have to take that terrifying step outside the safety of your hollow tree. The next time your father appears with food, positioned tantalizingly out of reach, you make your decision. You edge toward the opening, your heart pounding, wings spread for balance. The drop to the forest floor below looks impossibly far. But your father is right there, just a short hop away, and you're so hungry. You jump. Your wings catch the air, not really flying, but more like gliding with frantic flapping. You crash into the branch harder than you intended, claws scrambling for grip, but you made it. Your father drops the food, and you grab it eagerly, tearing into the sweet flesh of a ripe fig. That's when you realize you're not in the nest anymore. You're out in the open, perched on a branch with nothing but air and forest around you. Your first instinct is to scramble back to the safety of the cavity, but something stops you. Maybe it's the feeling of wind ruffling your feathers, or the way sunlight hits your wings and makes the colors shine. Maybe it's just the realization that you actually did it. You left the nest and survived. Your parents don't let you go back. Every time you try to return to the hollow, they block your path or call you away. The nest phase of your life is over. From now on, you're going to have to learn to survive in the real world, starting with the most basic skill any bird needs: how to fly properly. Your first attempts are disasters. You can glide from branch to branch if they're close enough, and you're getting better at landing without falling off completely. But actual sustained flight, the kind of graceful, powerful movement you see from your parents, is still beyond you. Your wings are strong enough, but you don't have the technique yet. Your parents start taking you to different trees, always staying close, but forcing you to make longer and longer jumps between branches. Sometimes you make it. Sometimes you end up hanging upside down, claws desperately gripping bark while you figure out how to right yourself. It's embarrassing, but it's also necessary. Every awkward landing teaches you something new about balance and wing control. The forest is full of sounds you're learning to interpret. The alarm calls that mean danger is approaching. The social chatter that indicates other macaws are nearby. The territorial declarations that warn you to stay away from certain areas. Your parents teach you these through example, their bodies tensing when they hear certain sounds, their calls changing to match the situation. Food is everywhere, but knowing what's safe to eat is crucial. Your parents guide you to trees heavy with fruits, showing you which ones are ripe and which ones will make you sick. They demonstrate how to crack open tough nuts with your powerful beak, how to strip bark to get at the sweet sap underneath, and where to find those clay deposits that help neutralize toxins. You're still completely dependent on them for survival, but you're learning fast. Every day brings new lessons, new challenges, new small victories. Your flying is improving, your calls are getting stronger and more sophisticated, and you're starting to understand the complex social dynamics of forest life. But you're also discovering just how dangerous the world can be. Hawks circle overhead, always watching for young birds like you who might make an easy target. Snakes hide in the branches, perfectly camouflaged until they strike. Even other macaws can be territorial and aggressive if you accidentally cross into their space. Your parents are constantly vigilant, their heads swiveling to track potential threats, their calls sharp and urgent when danger approaches. They've positioned themselves between you and the rest of the world, but they can't protect you forever. And soon enough, you're going to have to learn to protect yourself. One morning, your mother doesn't return from her feeding flight. You and your siblings wait on the branches where she left you, calling out with increasing desperation as the hours pass. Your father comes back alone, his calls different now, sharper, more urgent. He doesn't explain what happened because he can't. All you know is that the world just became twice as dangerous, and your family just got smaller. Your father tries to compensate, making more trips, bringing back larger quantities of food. But he's just one bird now, and there are still 3 of you to feed. The competition between you and your siblings intensifies. Every piece of fruit, every cracked nut becomes a prize worth fighting for. You learn to eat faster, grab more aggressively, and position yourself strategically when your father approaches with food. Your flying skills develop out of necessity. When your father lands on a distant branch with food, you can't afford to be the slowest one to reach him. You push yourself harder, taking longer leaps between trees, forcing your wings to carry you farther than feels comfortable. Your landings are still rough, but you're getting there. Each flight is a small victory against gravity and inexperience. The forest reveals more of its secrets as you explore. You discover that certain trees are highways for different species. Toucans prefer the tall cecropia trees, while smaller parrots stick to the dense understory. You learn which vines are strong enough to support your weight, and which ones will snap if you land too hard. You figure out that the sound of rustling leaves often means iguanas are moving through the canopy, while the crack of breaking branches usually signals something much larger and more dangerous. Your father starts leaving you alone for longer periods. At first, it's terrifying. Every shadow could be a predator, every unfamiliar sound a threat. But gradually, you begin to understand that you can survive on your own, at least for short stretches. You practice foraging, tentatively trying fruits that you've seen your father eat. Some are delicious, others are bland, and a few make you regret the decision immediately. Your siblings are facing the same challenges, but not all of them are adapting equally well. One seems naturally more cautious, always the last to try new foods or explore new areas. The other is almost reckless, taking risks that make even you nervous. You fall somewhere in between, careful but not paralyzed by fear. When your father does return from his hunting trips, he brings more than just food. He brings lessons disguised as play. He'll drop a piece of fruit just out of easy reach, forcing you to problem solve your way to it. He'll call from hidden perches, teaching you to locate sounds in the dense forest. He'll take you to trees you've never seen before, expanding your mental map of the territory. The rainy season arrives with little warning. One day the forest is dry and dusty. The next, it's a waterlogged maze of dripping leaves and swollen streams. The rain is intense when it comes, turning the canopy into a natural shower that soaks everything within minutes. You learn to seek shelter under the densest leaf cover, pressing close to tree trunks where the water runs off instead of dripping through. Flying in the rain is a completely different challenge. Your feathers become heavy and waterlogged, making every wing beat require more effort. The air itself feels thicker, harder to push through. Visibility drops to almost nothing during the heaviest downpours. You and your siblings huddle together on thick branches, waiting for the worst to pass. But the rain also brings opportunities. Fruits that were hard and unripe suddenly become soft and sweet. New shoots emerge from branches, tender and full of nutrients. Insects become more active, providing protein-rich snacks for birds quick enough to catch them. You watch your father demonstrate how to strip bark from rain-soaked trees, revealing the soft cambium layer underneath that's surprisingly tasty. Your social skills develop alongside your physical abilities. You learn that macaws have complex greeting rituals, specific calls for different situations, and subtle body language that communicates everything from aggression to submission. When your father encounters other adult macaws, you watch how he positions his body, how his feathers lie flat or stand erect depending on whether the meeting is friendly or territorial. You try to mimic these behaviors, but your attempts are clumsy and often misinterpreted. Other young macaws your age seem to understand instinctively, while you're still figuring out the basics. It's frustrating, but it's also motivation to keep practicing. Social acceptance will be crucial for your survival once you're fully independent. Your father begins introducing you to other macaw families. These meetings are carefully orchestrated, usually taking place in neutral territory where no one feels threatened. You observe how the adults interact, how they share information about food sources and potential dangers. The young birds from different families eye each other warily at first, but gradually begin to engage in what can only be described as play. These play sessions are more important than they appear. You're learning social hierarchies, testing your physical abilities against peers, and developing the communication skills you'll need as an adult. Some of the other young macaws are clearly stronger or more agile than you, while others seem less developed. You start to understand where you fit in the pecking order. Your beak is becoming a formidable tool. What started as a small, relatively soft appendage has grown into a powerful crushing instrument capable of cracking nuts that would challenge much larger animals. You practice on everything: twigs, bark, seed pods, even small rocks. Your father watches approvingly as you master the technique of positioning nuts just right to get maximum leverage. The forest canopy becomes your highway system. You learn which routes are fastest between important locations, which trees provide the best food at different times of year, and where to find water during dry spells. Your mental map grows more detailed every day, marked with safe roosting spots, productive feeding areas, and places to avoid when certain predators are active. Your siblings are developing their own specialties and preferences. One shows exceptional skill at finding hidden fruits, somehow locating ripe specimens that others miss entirely. The other demonstrates remarkable agility, able to navigate through dense vine tangles that would trap less nimble birds. You're still discovering your own strengths, but you're getting better at everything gradually. Your father's teaching methods become more sophisticated as you grow. Instead of simply showing you what to eat, he starts presenting you with choices, letting you make decisions and learn from the consequences. Some lessons are pleasant, discovering a new favorite fruit. Others are harsh, learning that certain caterpillars have defensive chemicals that burn your mouth. The night sounds of the forest become familiar music. The deep hoots of great horned owls, the chittering of bats, the splash of fish jumping in distant streams. You learn to sleep lightly, one ear always tuned for the calls that mean danger is approaching. Your father roosts close by, but he's making it clear that you need to develop your own vigilance. Predators are a constant concern, but you're learning to recognize and avoid them. The shadow of a hawk overhead sends you diving for dense cover. The distinctive call of a margay hunting in the trees makes you freeze until the danger passes. You watch your father's reactions and learn to read the subtle signs that distinguish real threats from false alarms. Your flying now covers serious distances. What started as desperate hops between nearby branches has evolved into confident flights across clearings and between distant tree groves. You're still not as graceful as your father, but you're getting there. The feeling of air rushing past your wings, of covering ground quickly and efficiently, is addictive. Your voice is changing too. The squeaky calls of your chick days are deepening into the rich, complex vocalizations of an adult macaw. You practice constantly, working on the nuances that will allow you to communicate effectively with others of your species. Your father corrects you when you get it wrong, demonstrating the proper inflection for different meanings. The forest is revealing its seasonal rhythms. Certain trees fruit at predictable times, while others are more erratic. You learn to read the signs, the subtle changes in leaf color that indicate ripening fruit, the way branches bend under the weight of developing seed pods, the increased activity of other animals that signals abundant food sources. Your relationship with your father is shifting. He's still protective and caring, but he's also pushing you toward independence with increasing insistence. His lessons are becoming more like suggestions, his guidance less direct. You sense that major changes are coming, though you don't yet understand what they'll mean for your future. Your father starts leaving for longer periods, sometimes disappearing for entire days. When he returns, he brings news from distant parts of the forest, information about fruiting trees miles away, warnings about new predators in the area, updates on other macaw families. You don't understand how he gathers all this intelligence, but you're beginning to realize that survival depends on knowing what's happening beyond your immediate territory. The dry season hits hard. Rivers that were rushing torrents during the rains become shallow streams, then mere trickles, then nothing but cracked mud. The forest changes dramatically, leaves wilt and fall, fruits become scarce, and many animals migrate to areas with more reliable water sources. Your father leads you and your siblings on longer journeys, following ancient flight paths to seasonal feeding grounds. These migrations are exhausting. You fly for hours at a time, your wings burning with fatigue, following your father's lead as he navigates by landmarks you're only beginning to recognize. Mountain ridges, river bends, distinctive rock formations all become waypoints in the mental GPS you're developing. Sometimes, you stop to rest on cliff tops where other macaw families have gathered, creating temporary communities around reliable food sources. The competition at these seasonal sites is intense. Dozens of macaws converge on the same fruiting trees, and there's a strict hierarchy about who feeds first. Your father's status determines where your family fits in this pecking order, and you watch carefully as he negotiates access to the best feeding spots. Sometimes it involves aggressive displays, wings spread and calls echoing across the valley. Other times it's more subtle, strategic positioning and patient waiting. You learn that clay licks are crucial during these gatherings. The exposed mineral deposits along riverbanks and cliff faces provide essential nutrients that neutralize toxins from the seeds and fruits you eat. But clay licks are also dangerous. They're open areas where predators can easily spot feeding birds. Your father teaches you to approach cautiously, always with escape routes planned, never staying longer than necessary. Your first visit to a major clay lick is overwhelming. Hundreds of parrots of different species create a living rainbow against the gray-brown cliff face. Scarlet macaws like yourself mix with blue and yellow macaws, green-winged macaws, and smaller species you don't recognize. The sound is deafening, a cacophony of calls, wing beats, and the constant scraping of beaks against clay. Your father demonstrates the proper technique. You don't just grab any clay. Different areas have different mineral concentrations, and experienced birds know exactly where to feed. You watch him select a spot, carefully excavating small pieces with his beak, testing and tasting before committing to a full meal. When you try to copy him, your first attempts are clumsy, but you're learning. A jaguar appears at the base of the cliff. The reaction is instantaneous. Hundreds of birds explode into the air simultaneously, their panic calls echoing off the rock walls. You follow your father's lead, pumping your wings desperately to gain altitude as the big cat paces below, calculating whether any bird might be within jumping range. Your heart pounds as you realize how quickly safety can turn to mortal danger. The incident at the clay lick teaches you valuable lessons about group dynamics. Being part of a flock provides safety in numbers, but it also means sharing resources and accepting your place in the hierarchy. You observe how different birds position themselves, the most dominant near the center, where the best clay is found, younger and less experienced birds like yourself relegated to the edges. Your siblings are developing different strategies for dealing with these social pressures. One becomes exceptionally good at finding alternative feeding spots away from the crowds, discovering small clay deposits that others overlook. The other learns to be aggressive and pushy, fighting for better positions despite being younger and smaller than most competitors. Oops. You're still figuring out your own approach. Your father begins introducing you to the concept of territory. Unlike the temporary feeding grounds where multiple families coexist uneasily, there are areas of forest that belong exclusively to mated pairs. These territories are defended fiercely, and trespassing can result in violent confrontations. You learn to recognize the boundary markers, specific trees where territorial calls are made, flight paths that are off limits to outsiders. One day, while exploring what you thought was neutral territory, you accidentally cross into someone else's domain. The response is immediate and terrifying. A massive male macaw comes screaming out of the canopy, his wings spread to their full impressive span, his calls sharp with aggression. Your father intervenes quickly, positioning himself between you and the angry territorial owner, using specific vocalizations that seem to diffuse the situation. The encounter leaves you shaken but educated. Territory disputes aren't just about food, they're about breeding rights, nesting sites, and the fundamental resources needed to raise offspring. Your father explains through demonstration and example that respecting boundaries is essential for peaceful coexistence, but that knowing how to defend yourself is equally important. Your flying skills reach new levels of sophistication. You're no longer just moving from point A to point B. You're learning to read air currents, to use thermals for effortless soaring, to navigate through dense forest at high speed without colliding with branches. Your father takes you on increasingly challenging flights through narrow gaps between trees, around cliff faces, across open valleys where hawks might be hunting. Wind becomes your teacher. You learn to feel subtle changes in air pressure that indicate approaching weather, to use crosswinds to your advantage, to compensate for downdrafts near cliff faces. Your feathers adjust automatically now, making minute corrections that keep you stable in turbulent conditions. What once felt like a constant battle against gravity now feels like a dance with the elements. Your diet expands beyond fruits and nuts to include flowers, bark, and even some insects. Your father shows you which palm flowers are edible, how to strip bark from specific trees to reach the nutritious cambium layer underneath, and how to catch protein-rich beetle larvae that hide in rotting logs. Your digestive system adapts to handle this varied diet, though you still rely on clay to neutralize toxins from certain foods. The forest reveals its hidden dangers gradually. Seemingly harmless vines turn out to be covered in irritating hairs. Beautiful fruits that look perfectly ripe contain alkaloids that can make you violently sick. Even other birds can be threats. You learn to avoid the territories of harpy eagles, whose massive talons can easily kill a macaw. Your father's lessons become increasingly focused on threat assessment and risk management. Your voice develops its full range and power. The calls that once sounded like amateur imitations now carry the authority and complexity of adult communication. You can produce the contact calls that keep families together across miles of forest, the alarm calls that warn of specific types of danger, and the social vocalizations that establish your identity and intentions when meeting other macaws. Mating displays become part of your education, even though you're still years away from breeding. You watch adult pairs perform their elaborate courtship rituals, synchronized flights, mutual preening, the sharing of regurgitated food that bonds mates together. Your father demonstrates some of these behaviors, not as courtship but as teaching tools, helping you understand the complex social interactions you'll need to master as an adult. Your siblings begin showing signs of independence that worry you. One has started making short solo flights, exploring areas beyond your father's immediate territory. The other spends increasing amounts of time with young macaws from other families, participating in the loose flocks that form among adolescents. You feel torn between the security of staying close to your father and the growing urge to explore on your own. Seasonal changes bring new challenges and opportunities. The return of rains triggers explosive growth in the forest. New leaves unfurl, flowers bloom, fruits develop rapidly. But the abundance also attracts more competition. Migrating birds return to reclaimed territories, and the peaceful feeding sites of the dry season become battlegrounds once again. Your father's behavior toward you shifts noticeably. He's still protective when real danger threatens, but he no longer intervenes in minor conflicts or feeds you when you're perfectly capable of feeding yourself. His calls become more directive, pushing you toward independence rather than dependence. You sense that your childhood is ending, though you're not sure you're ready for what comes next. The forest canopy becomes your world, in a way it never was when you were earthbound. You know every major tree in a territory spanning dozens of square miles, can navigate by landmark and instinct through the three-dimensional maze of branches and leaves. Your mental map includes not just locations, but timing, which trees fruit, when, where water can be found during dry spells, which roots are safest at different times of day. Your relationship with your siblings becomes more complicated as you all mature. The simple competition for food that defined your early days has evolved into something more complex: rivalry for status, territory, and eventually mates. You still cooperate when faced with external threats, but there's an underlying tension that wasn't there before. Your father introduces you to the concept of seasonal migration patterns that extend far beyond anything you've experienced. Some macaws travel hundreds of miles following fruiting cycles, crossing mountain ranges and vast river systems. The navigation skills required for these journeys are extraordinary. Reading wind patterns, recognizing distant landmarks, remembering routes flown only once before. Night roosts become social gatherings where information is exchanged across the macaw community. Your father takes you to these communal sleeping sites where dozens of families converge as darkness falls. The chatter before sleep is filled with intelligence about food sources, weather patterns, and potential dangers. You listen carefully, building your own database of forest knowledge. Your first major solo flight comes unexpectedly. Your father leads you toward a distant fruiting tree, but partway there he suddenly veers off, leaving you to continue alone. You panic briefly, calling after him, but he doesn't return. You have a choice: turn back to familiar territory or continue to the destination on your own. You choose to continue, and the successful completion of that solo journey marks a turning point in your development. The forest tests you in ways your father's protection never allowed. You make mistakes, choosing the wrong route and having to backtrack, misjudging the ripeness of fruit and getting sick, landing in areas where you're not welcome and having to retreat quickly. But each error teaches you something valuable, building the experiential knowledge you'll need for complete independence. Your physical development reaches its peak. Your wingspan now matches your father's. Your beak has the full crushing power of an adult macaw. And your tail feathers display the brilliant scarlet and blue that mark you as a mature member of your species. Mentally, you're still learning, but physically, you're equipped for anything the forest might demand. The day comes when your father doesn't return to the family roost. You and your siblings wait through the night, calling occasionally, but there's no response. By morning, you understand that this separation is intentional. Your father has decided that your education is complete, that you're ready to face the world without his guidance and protection. Your siblings scatter in different directions, each following their own instincts toward independence. You watch them disappear into the forest canopy, wondering if you'll ever see them again. The bonds that held your family together through months of shared danger and discovery are dissolving, replaced by the solitary existence that defines adult macaw life outside of breeding season. Alone for the first time in your life, you feel both terror and an exhilaration. Every decision is now yours to make: where to fly, what to eat, how to respond to threats. The safety net of parental protection is gone, but so are the restrictions that came with it. You're free to explore, to make mistakes, to discover who you are when you're not defined by your relationship to your family. The forest that once seemed infinite now feels manageable. You know its rhythms, its dangers, its resources. You understand the social dynamics of macaw society and your place within it. Most importantly, you've developed the judgment to make the life or death decisions that every wild macaw faces daily. Your real education is just beginning, but you're equipped with the tools you need to survive. Your first weeks of true independence are a crash course in survival. You make mistakes that would have been fatal if your father hadn't prepared you so well. You misjudge the distance between trees and find yourself gliding desperately toward branches that are just out of reach. You land hard, claws scrambling for grip on smooth bark while your wings beat frantically to keep you from falling. It's embarrassing, but you're alive, and that's what matters. Food becomes your primary obsession. Without your father bringing regular meals, you have to find everything yourself. Some days are good. You discover a tree heavy with ripe figs that keeps you satisfied for hours. Other days are brutal. You spend dawn to dusk searching for anything edible, your stomach cramping with hunger, your energy flagging as you push yourself to keep flying. You learn to read the forest's subtle signs with new urgency. The way certain leaves curl when fruit is about to ripen, the sound termites make when they're active in dead wood, the flight patterns of other birds that might lead you to food sources you haven't discovered yet. Every detail matters when you're responsible for your own survival. Competition is everywhere. Other young macaws like yourself are scattered throughout the forest, all facing the same challenges. When you find a productive feeding tree, you're rarely alone for long. Sometimes you arrive to find the best spots already taken by birds who got there first. Sometimes you're the one who has to defend your find from latecomers who think they can muscle in. Your first real fight happens over a palm tree loaded with ripe fruit. You're feeding peacefully when another young macaw lands nearby and starts working its way toward your section of the tree. You try the intimidation tactics your father demonstrated, spreading your wings, puffing your feathers, making aggressive calls. The intruder ignores you completely. When it gets close enough to threaten your food source, you strike. Your beak clashes against its beak with a sharp crack that echoes through the forest. Wings beat furiously as you grapple for position, each trying to force the other away from the tree. Your opponent is slightly larger than you, but you're more determined. You manage to grab its wing with your beak and twist, causing it to lose balance and tumble toward a lower branch. The fight ends as quickly as it started. Your opponent retreats to a different tree, and you're left breathing hard, your heart pounding with adrenaline. You've just learned that you can hold your own in a confrontation, but you've also learned that fighting is exhausting and risky. Better to avoid conflicts when possible, but be ready to defend yourself when necessary. Loneliness becomes a constant companion. After months of being surrounded by family, the silence of solo existence is overwhelming. You call out sometimes, hoping to hear a response from another macaw, but the forest often swallows your voice without reply. The social interactions you took for granted, shared meals, mutual preening, the comfort of roosting together, are now rare treats rather than daily experiences. You start seeking out other young macaws, drawn by the same loneliness that drives them. These loose associations aren't like family bonds, but they provide some relief from the isolation. You learn to navigate the complex social dynamics of these temporary flocks, who you can trust, who will steal your food given the chance, who might actually help if you run into trouble. Weather becomes a much more serious concern without the buffer of family support. When storms hit, you have to find your own shelter and ride them out alone. You discover that the forest offers plenty of protection if you know where to look. Dense clusters of leaves that shed rain, deep recesses in tree trunks that block wind, elevated perches that keep you above floodwaters. Your first major storm is terrifying. The wind howls through the canopy with enough force to snap large branches, and rain falls so hard you can barely see 3 feet in any direction. You huddle in the hollow of an old tree, listening to the chaos outside, wondering if the whole forest might blow down around you. When morning comes and you emerge to find the world still intact, you feel like you've passed some kind of test. Predators become a much more pressing threat without your father's vigilant protection. You develop an almost paranoid awareness of your surroundings, constantly scanning for the shadows that might mean death from above. Hawks are your primary worry during daylight hours, while owls pose the greatest threat at night. You learn to recognize their hunting patterns and adjust your behavior accordingly. Your first close call with a hawk happens while you're feeding in an exposed area. You're so focused on cracking open a particularly tough nut that you don't notice the shadow passing overhead until it's almost too late. Instinct saves you. You drop the nut and dive for the nearest dense cover, just as massive talons slice through the air where you were perched seconds before. The hawk doesn't give up immediately. It circles overhead, waiting for you to emerge from your hiding spot. You stay frozen among the thick leaves for what feels like hours, your muscles cramping from holding the same position, your bladder full but impossible to empty without revealing your location. When the predator finally moves on to hunt elsewhere, you realize how close you came to becoming someone else's meal. Night roosts become crucial for both safety and social contact. You discover that certain trees serve as informal gathering spots where young macaws like yourself congregate as darkness falls. These aren't the organized family roosts your father took you to, but chaotic assemblies of adolescents and young adults seeking safety in numbers. The social dynamics at these roosts are complex and ever-changing. Alliances form and dissolve based on convenience rather than genuine bonds. You might spend several nights roosting next to the same individuals, sharing information about food sources and dangers, only to find them gone without explanation the next evening. It's a harsh introduction to the reality that most adult macaws are fundamentally solitary creatures. Your flying skills continue to improve through necessity rather than instruction. You learn to navigate through the forest in complete darkness, using memory and instinct to avoid obstacles you can't see. Your wings develop the endurance needed for long-distance flights as you expand your territory in search of reliable food sources. Speed becomes essential when you discover that fruit trees often attract multiple species of competitors. Toucans, other parrots, and even some mammals can strip a tree bare in hours if the fruit is particularly desirable. You learn to spot the early signs of ripening and time your visits to get the best selections before the crowds arrive. Your diet diversifies out of necessity. The selective eating habits you developed under your father's guidance give way to a more opportunistic approach. You try foods you would have avoided before, bitter fruits that provide essential nutrients, insects that offer protein when other sources are scarce, even flowers and bark when nothing else is available. Some of these dietary experiments go badly. You spend a miserable day, violently sick, after eating fruits that looked ripe but were actually toxic. You learn to recognize the subtle differences between safe and dangerous foods through trial and error, building a mental database of what to eat and what to avoid that will serve you for the rest of your life. Clay becomes more important than ever. Without your father to guide you to the best sources, you have to find mineral deposits on your own. You follow other birds to clay lakes, but the competition is fierce and the risks are high. Exposed riverbanks, where clay is accessible, are also favored hunting spots for predators that know birds must come to these locations. Your first solo visit to a major clay lake is nerve-wracking. Dozens of birds are already there when you arrive, creating a living rainbow against the brown cliff face. You wait on a nearby perch, watching for patterns in the feeding behavior, trying to identify the safest approach routes and the best spots to position yourself. When you finally work up the courage to join the feeding frenzy, you're immediately overwhelmed by the chaos. Birds jostle for position, aggressive calls echo off the rock walls, and the constant movement makes it hard to focus on actually eating clay. You manage to get a few mouthfuls of the essential minerals before a larger bird decides your spot looks better than its own and forces you to retreat. Seasonal changes bring new challenges that test everything you've learned. The dry season arrives with punishing heat and dwindling water sources. Rivers that were rushing torrents during the rains become shallow streams, then mere trickles. You learn to follow other animals to hidden springs and to extract moisture from succulent fruits when surface water isn't available. Migration becomes a necessity rather than a family adventure. You follow traditional flight paths that have been used by macaws for generations, joining loose flocks of other birds, making the same journey to seasonal feeding grounds. These migrations can cover hundreds of miles, testing your endurance and navigation skills to their limits. Your first long-distance migration is exhausting. You fly for hours without rest, following birds who seem to know exactly where they're going while you struggle to keep up. Your wings burn with fatigue, your throat is parched, and several times you consider giving up and turning back. But the alternative, staying in territory where food and water are becoming scarce, isn't really an option. The seasonal feeding grounds are revelation and nightmare combined. The abundance of food is incredible. Trees heavy with fruits you've never tasted, nuts in quantities that seem impossible, clay licks that extend for miles along river valleys. But the competition is also intense. Hundreds of macaws converge on these areas, creating a social hierarchy based on size, aggression, and experience that relegates young birds like yourself to the bottom of the pecking order. You learn to be patient and opportunistic at these gathering sites. The best feeding spots are claimed by dominant adults who will aggressively defend their positions. You wait for opportunities when the dominant birds are distracted, when new food sources are discovered away from the main crowds, when conflicts between adults create openings for quick-thinking subordinates. Your social skills develop rapidly in these intense environments. You learn to read body language with precision, to recognize which birds are bluffing and which are genuinely dangerous. You discover that forming temporary alliances with other young macaws can help you access better feeding areas and provide protection against bullies. The return journey to your home territory is often more difficult than the outbound migration. You're traveling against prevailing winds, the weather is less predictable, and you're no longer following experienced guides who know the route. Some young macaws get lost and never make it back to their natal areas. You navigate by landmarks and instinct, hoping your memory of the outbound journey is accurate enough to guide you home. Territory becomes an increasingly important concept as you mature. The areas you frequent most often start to feel like your own, even though you lack the experience and dominance to actually defend them. You develop detailed knowledge of specific trees, water sources, and safe roosting spots within a gradually expanding range. Conflicts with other macaws become more frequent and serious as competition for resources intensifies. What started as minor squabbles over individual fruits escalates to prolonged confrontations over access to entire trees. You win some of these battles through determination and aggression, but you lose others to birds who are simply bigger, stronger, or more experienced. Your first major defeat is humbling. You discover a tree loaded with your favorite fruits and settle in for a productive feeding session. A larger adult arrives and immediately begins making aggressive displays, clearly intending to claim the entire tree for itself. You try to stand your ground, matching its aggressive calls and postures, but when it actually attacks, you realize you're outmatched. The beating you receive isn't severe, but it's thorough enough to make the point. Beak strikes to your head and wings, powerful grips that could easily break bones if applied with full force, aggressive charges that send you tumbling from branch to branch. You retreat in defeat, your pride wounded more than your body, but with a clear understanding of your place in the hierarchy. These defeats teach you to pick your battles more carefully. You learn to assess opponents quickly and accurately, to recognize when you have a chance of winning and when discretion is the better part of valor. Sometimes, the smart move is to find alternative food sources rather than waste energy on conflicts you can't win. Your voice reaches full maturity, developing the range and power that will define your identity for the rest of your life. The calls that once sounded juvenile and uncertain now carry the authority of an adult macaw. You can produce the complex vocalizations needed for long-distance communication, the subtle variations that convey different emotional states, and the aggressive calls that establish dominance. Communication becomes more sophisticated as you interact with a wider range of macaws. You learn the dialects specific to different regions, the variations in calls that identify birds from different family groups, and the subtle signals that convey everything from friendliness to territorial threats. Your vocal repertoire expands to include dozens of distinct calls, each with specific meanings and appropriate contexts. Weather patterns become predictable teachers. You learn to read the subtle signs that indicate approaching storms, changes in air pressure that you feel in your bones, the behavior of other animals that sense atmospheric disturbances before they become visible, the particular quality of light that precedes heavy rain. This knowledge allows you to seek shelter before the worst weather hits. Your feathers reach their full adult coloration and quality. The brilliant reds, blues, and yellows that mark you as a scarlet macaw shine with an intensity that catches sunlight and turns your flight into a moving rainbow. Your plumage is not just beautiful, it's also functional, providing insulation against temperature extremes and protection against the minor injuries that are inevitable in forest life. Preening becomes a more elaborate and important ritual. You spend increasing amounts of time maintaining your feathers, using your beak to clean and arrange each one with precision. Proper feather maintenance is essential for flight efficiency, temperature regulation, and social signaling. Damaged or dirty plumage can mean the difference between life and death in situations that require peak performance. The forest reveals more of its secrets as your experience grows. You discover fruiting cycles that span multiple years, learning which trees produce abundance only occasionally and which can be counted on for regular harvests. You identify the subtle environmental cues that indicate when rare foods will become available, allowing you to time your movements to take advantage of these opportunities. Danger recognition becomes instinctive rather than learned. You can identify potential threats by sound, movement, or even just the absence of normal forest activity. The sudden silence that indicates a predator is nearby, the particular flight pattern that marks a hawk on the hunt, the ground vibrations that warn of approaching mammals, all become part of your automatic threat assessment system. Your first encounter with humans is confusing and frightening. You've heard their sounds from a distance, the mechanical noises of their vehicles, the sharp cracks of their weapons, the constant chatter of their voices. But seeing them up close is startling. They move awkwardly through the forest, making enormous amounts of noise, their bright colors and strange smells announcing their presence from miles away. Some humans seem harmless, content to watch from a distance and make excited sounds when they spot you. Others are clearly threats. You learn to recognize the ones who carry the long sticks that make loud noises and cause birds to fall from the sky. Your father's lessons about avoiding humans make more sense now that you see how unpredictable and dangerous they can be. Human-modified landscapes become increasingly common as you explore beyond your natal territory. Areas where the forest has been cleared for agriculture or development present both opportunities and dangers. The fruit trees humans plant can provide excellent food, but the open spaces make you vulnerable to predators, and the humans themselves often don't appreciate sharing their crops. You learn to raid human food sources strategically, quick strikes during times when humans are absent, careful approaches that allow for rapid escape if discovered, coordination with other birds to overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers. It's risky behavior, but the rewards can be substantial when natural food sources are scarce. Your relationship with other parrot species becomes more complex as you mature. The mixed flocks you sometimes join include various species of Amazons, smaller parrots, and even occasionally other macaws. Each species has its own feeding preferences, flight patterns, and social structures. Learning to navigate these multi-species gatherings requires flexibility and cultural sensitivity. Competition with other parrot species can be intense, particularly at concentrated food sources. Larger species like yourself generally dominate smaller birds, but numbers can overcome size advantages. You learn to work within the temporary hierarchies that form in mixed flocks, taking advantage of opportunities while respecting the strengths of other species. Your mental map of the forest becomes incredibly detailed, encompassing hundreds of square miles and thousands of individual trees, water sources, and landmarks. You can navigate by multiple routes between any 2 points in your territory, adjusting your path based on weather conditions, predator activity, or the availability of food along the way. Memory becomes one of your most valuable survival tools. You remember not just locations, but timing, which trees fruit, when, where water can be found during different seasons, which areas are most dangerous at various times of day. This accumulated knowledge allows you to make efficient use of your time and energy, focusing your efforts where they're most likely to be successful. Your flying skills reach their peak efficiency. You can cover vast distances with minimal energy expenditure, using thermals and wind patterns to your advantage. You navigate through dense forest at high speed, making split-second adjustments to avoid obstacles. Your aerial maneuvers are precise enough to land on specific branches in crowded canopies or to execute complex escape sequences when threatened by predators. Flight becomes more than just transportation. It's expression, communication, and joy. You develop your own flying style, incorporating aerobatic elements that serve no survival purpose but satisfy some deeper need for artistic expression. These flights are often solo performances, moments of pure freedom that remind you why being a macaw is worth all the struggles and dangers. Your understanding of forest ecology deepens beyond simple predator-prey relationships. You begin to see the complex web of interactions that connect all forest life, how the activities of insects affect fruit production, how weather patterns influence animal behavior, how the presence or absence of certain species cascades through entire ecosystems. This ecological awareness makes you a more effective forager and a better predictor of environmental changes. You learn to read the health of the forest itself, recognizing early signs of drought, disease, or human encroachment that might affect your long-term survival prospects. This knowledge allows you to adapt your behavior proactively, rather than simply reacting to changes after they occur. Your digestive system adapts to handle an increasingly diverse diet. The specialized gut bacteria that help break down different types of plant material adjust to your changing food preferences. You develop tolerance for foods that would have made you sick as a juvenile, expanding your options for survival during times when preferred foods are unavailable. Clay consumption becomes more strategic and informed. You learn to identify different types of clay and their specific mineral contents, choosing your consumption based on what your body needs to neutralize the particular toxins in your recent diet. This sophisticated understanding of nutrition and toxicology keeps you healthy, even when eating marginal foods during difficult periods. Your social intelligence continues to develop through constant interaction with other macaws. You learn to manipulate social situations to your advantage, forming temporary alliances when beneficial and breaking them when they no longer serve your interests. You become skilled at reading the motivations and intentions of other birds, allowing you to predict their behavior and respond accordingly. Deception becomes part of your social toolkit. You learn to give false alarm calls to distract competitors from food sources, to conceal your own discoveries until you've had time to exploit them fully, and to project confidence even when you're uncertain or afraid. Those skills are essential for survival in a social environment where information is power and weakness invites exploitation. Your emotional range expands as you experience the full spectrum of adult life. Joy at discovering abundant food sources, fear during predator encounters, frustration when blocked from resources by dominant birds, satisfaction after successful confrontations, all become part of your daily emotional landscape. You learn to manage these emotions effectively, using them as information while not letting them control your behavior. Stress management becomes crucial as the pressures of independent life accumulate. You develop techniques for dealing with chronic anxiety, meditation-like behaviors where you sit quietly and focus on your breathing, grooming rituals that provide comfort and stress relief, social interactions that offer emotional support, even when they don't provide material benefits. Your sleep patterns adjust to optimize safety while ensuring adequate rest. You learn to sleep lightly, maintaining enough awareness to detect threats while still getting the deep sleep necessary for physical and mental recovery. You develop preferences for specific types of roosting sites, positions that offer protection from weather and predators while allowing for quick escape if necessary. Dreams become part of your mental processing system. You dream of flying, of finding food, of confronting predators and rivals. These dreams seem to serve as mental rehearsals, allowing you to practice responses to challenging situations in a safe environment. You often wake from dreams with solutions to problems that had been troubling you during waking hours. Your physical condition reaches its peak as you master the demands of independent life. Your muscles are lean and powerful, adapted for the constant flying that survival requires. Your reflexes are lightning fast, honed by countless encounters with predators and competitors. Your senses are acute, capable of detecting subtle changes in your environment that might indicate opportunities or threats. Injuries become more common as you take greater risks and face more challenges. Minor cuts from thorns and rough bark, bruises from collisions and fights, occasionally more serious wounds from predator attacks or territorial disputes. You learn basic self-care, cleaning wounds when possible, and adjusting your behavior to accommodate temporary disabilities. Your tolerance for discomfort increases dramatically. Hunger, thirst, exhaustion, pain, all become manageable conditions rather than overwhelming emergencies. You learn to function effectively even when your body is telling you to rest, to find food even when your energy reserves are nearly depleted, to think clearly even when stressed or frightened. The forest begins to feel truly like home rather than just familiar territory. You develop emotional attachments to specific locations, favorite roosting trees, productive feeding areas, scenic overlooks where you go to rest and think. These places become psychological anchors, providing stability and comfort in an otherwise chaotic existence. Your confidence grows with each successful challenge overcome. Early defeats and failures become learning experiences rather than sources of shame. You begin to trust your instincts and abilities, taking calculated risks that would have terrified you as a younger bird. This confidence translates into better outcomes in competitive situations and more efficient use of your time and energy. Seasonal rhythms become deeply ingrained in your biology and behavior. Your body anticipates changes in food availability, weather patterns, and social dynamics. You begin preparing for migrations weeks before they become necessary, building up fat reserves and conditioning your flight muscles for the journeys ahead. Your place in the forest community becomes more established as other birds learn to recognize you as a permanent resident rather than a transient juvenile. This recognition brings both benefits and responsibilities, access to information networks and mutual aid relationships, but also expectations of reciprocity and respect for established territorial boundaries. The future begins to feel possible rather than uncertain. You've survived the most dangerous period of your life, the transition from dependent juvenile to independent adult. Your skills are well developed, your knowledge is extensive, and your confidence is growing. For the first time since leaving your father's protection, you feel like you might actually have a chance at long-term survival. But survival is just the first step. As you approach sexual maturity, new instincts begin to stir. The solitary existence that has defined your young adult life starts to feel incomplete. Somewhere in the vast forest, other macaws are facing the same realization. The next phase of your life will be about more than just surviving. It will be about finding a mate, establishing territory, and perhaps continuing the cycle that brought you into existence. The skills you've developed during these months of independence will serve you well in the challenges ahead. But courtship, mating, and raising offspring will require entirely new abilities and knowledge. The forest that has been your teacher and adversary will soon become the backdrop for the most important relationships of your life. Your body is changing in ways that have nothing to do with physical growth. Hormones surge through your system, triggering instincts you've never felt before. The solitary existence that once felt natural now seems incomplete. You find yourself calling out more frequently, not for food or to warn of danger, but with vocalizations you don't fully understand. These calls are deeper, more complex, carrying messages you're only beginning to comprehend. Other macaws respond to these new calls differently than they did before. Where once they might have ignored you or seen you as competition, now some approach with curious interest. The social dynamics you thought you understood are shifting, revealing layers of complexity you never noticed during your focus on basic survival. You start paying attention to things that previously seemed irrelevant. The way certain birds preen their feathers, the subtle postures they adopt when interacting with potential mates, the elaborate flight displays that serve no apparent survival function. What once looked like wasted energy now appears to be sophisticated communication. Your first attempts at courtship behavior are clumsy and embarrassing. You try to mimic the aerial displays you've observed, but your timing is off and your technique is crude. Instead of the graceful spirals and synchronized flying you've seen from established pairs, your efforts result in awkward tumbles and confused responses from the birds you're trying to impress. A young female watches your pathetic display attempts from a nearby branch. She's roughly your age, her plumage showing the same brilliant adult coloration that marks your own maturity. When you attempt an elaborate dive and climb sequence that you've seen older males perform, you misjudge the recovery and crash into a tangle of vines. She makes a sound that you swear is the macaw equivalent of laughter. Undeterred by your spectacular failure, you try a different approach. Food sharing is a crucial part of macaw courtship, so you search for the most impressive fruit you can find. After an hour of careful selection, you return with what you consider to be the perfect offering, a perfectly ripe fig that required considerable effort to obtain. You land near the female and present your gift with what you hope is an attractive call. She examines the fruit critically, then takes it without any of the mutual preening or reciprocal behavior you expected. She eats it efficiently and flies away, leaving you wondering what went wrong. Apparently, courtship is more complicated than simply providing food. Your attempts to understand mating behavior lead you to observe established pairs more carefully. You notice that successful courtship involves intricate sequences of behavior that can take weeks or even months to complete. The aerial displays you tried to copy are just one small part of a complex ritual that includes vocal duets, synchronized feeding, mutual preening, and territorial displays. You watch a mated pair perform their morning duet from adjacent trees. Their calls interweave with perfect timing, creating harmonies that resonate through the forest canopy. When you try to join in, your voice cracks embarrassingly, and both birds stop singing to stare at you with what appears to be annoyance. You retreat quickly, your face burning with embarrassment. The female you've been attempting to court begins appearing in areas where you forage, though she maintains careful distance. You're not sure if this is coincidence or if she's actually interested in your bumbling attempts at romance. She feeds in the same trees, roosts in nearby areas, and occasionally responds to your calls, but she never approaches directly. You decide to try a more patient approach. Instead of dramatic displays or obvious gift-giving, you simply make yourself available. When she feeds, you feed nearby, but not so close as to seem threatening. When she calls, you respond appropriately, but don't try to dominate the conversation. Gradually, the distance between you shrinks from hundreds of yards to dozens, then to mere branches. Your first successful mutual preening session happens almost by accident. You're both feeding in the same tree when a sudden rainstorm forces you to seek shelter under the same dense cluster of leaves. Pressed together by necessity, you begin grooming your own feathers to pass the time. She starts doing the same, and somehow the activities merge into mutual assistance. The sensation of her beak carefully arranging your neck feathers is unlike anything you've experienced. It's intimate in a way that goes beyond mere physical contact, creating a bond that feels both natural and profound. When the rain stops and you part ways, something fundamental has changed between you. Courtship progresses slowly over the following weeks. The mutual preening sessions become more frequent and elaborate. You begin sharing food not as one-sided gifts, but as genuine exchanges where both parties contribute. Your flight patterns start to synchronize, creating the aerial ballets that mark established pairs. Other males notice your developing relationship, and some attempt to interfere. A larger and a more experienced Macaw begins making aggressive displays whenever he sees you with the female. His calls are louder than yours, his aerial displays more polished, and his territorial posturing more intimidating. You realize you're going to have to fight for the relationship you've been building. The confrontation happens at dawn while you're performing your morning duet with the female. The rival male arrives with loud, aggressive calls, positioning himself between you and your potential mate. His message is clear. He's claiming her for himself, and you need to back down or face the consequences. You don't back down. The fight that follows is more intense than any territorial dispute you've experienced. This isn't just about food or roosting spots. It's about reproductive rights and genetic legacy. You and your rival grapple in midair, beaks clashing, wings beating furiously, as each tries to gain advantage over the other. The female watches from a nearby perch, her attention focused intently on the battle. You realize that this fight is as much a performance for her benefit as it is a genuine conflict. She's evaluating both males, using the confrontation to assess strength, determination, and fighting ability, all qualities that will matter if she chooses to mate and raise offspring. Your smaller size becomes an advantage in the aerial combat. While your opponent is stronger, you're more agile, able to dodge his attacks and strike from unexpected angles. You manage to get a grip on his wing and twist, sending him spiraling toward the ground. He recovers before crashing, but the message is clear. You're not going to be intimidated. The rival male retreats, but you know this isn't over. Competition for mates is fierce, and other males will challenge your developing relationship. You'll need to be constantly vigilant, ready to defend what you've built through patient courtship and careful attention to the female's preferences. Your bond with the female deepens through shared experiences and mutual support. When a hawk threatens the area where you're feeding, you work together to mob the predator, your coordinated attacks more effective than either could manage alone. When she discovers a particularly productive fruit tree, she calls to share the information rather than keeping it to herself. The synchronized flying that marks established pairs begins to feel natural rather than forced. You anticipate each other's movements, turning and diving in perfect harmony. These aerial dances serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate your compatibility to other macaws, strengthen the emotional bond between you, and provide practice for the coordinated activities that successful breeding requires. Territory becomes a shared concern rather than an individual priority. Together, you begin establishing boundaries around the area that will become your breeding territory. This involves confronting other macaws who might claim the same resources, marking boundaries with calls and scent, and learning every tree, water source, and potential nesting site within your chosen area. The search for a suitable nesting cavity becomes your primary focus as breeding season approaches. Macaws are cavity nesters, requiring large hollow trees that provide protection from weather and predators. Good nesting sites are rare and highly contested, often claimed by the same pairs year after year. You and your mate spend weeks evaluating potential nest sites. The cavity needs to be large enough for two adults and eventually their offspring, high enough to discourage ground predators, and structurally sound enough to withstand storms. The entrance should be big enough for easy access, but not so large that it allows larger predators inside. You find a promising hollow in an ancient cecropia tree, but it's already occupied by a pair of toucans. The birds are smaller than you, but they're established residents with territorial rights. Evicting them will require careful planning and coordinated effort. You and your mate begin a campaign of harassment, making their lives miserable with constant aggressive displays and loud calls. The toucans fight back initially, but they're outnumbered and outgunned. After several days of relentless pressure, they abandon the cavity and seek accommodation elsewhere. You and your mate immediately claim the hollow, beginning the process of preparing it for nesting. Nest preparation involves more than just moving in. The cavity needs to be cleaned of debris left by previous occupants, lined with fresh wood chips and soft plant material, and modified if necessary to improve access or drainage. You both work tirelessly, making multiple trips to gather materials and arrange them to your mate's exacting standards. Your mate becomes increasingly selective about food during the pre-laying period. She seeks out specific fruits and nuts that provide the nutrients needed for egg production, and she spends more time at clay licks to obtain essential minerals. Whilst you support these efforts by finding and defending the best feeding sites, ensuring she has access to optimal nutrition. The first egg appears in the nest cavity after weeks of preparation. It's surprisingly large relative to your mate's body size, pearl white with a slightly rough texture. She immediately begins the incubation process, settling over the egg to provide the constant warmth needed for proper development. A second egg follows 2 days later, then a third. Your mate rarely leaves the nest now, relying on you to provide most of her food. This is the most demanding period you've experienced. You're essentially supporting two adults on resources you gather alone, while also defending territory and watching for threats to the vulnerable nest. The responsibility is overwhelming at times. You fly constantly, searching for food, fighting off competitors, and rushing back to feed your mate. She's lost weight during the incubation period, despite your efforts, her body using its own reserves to maintain the proper temperature for the developing eggs. The success of your first breeding attempt depends entirely on your ability to provide adequate resources. Predators pose a constant threat to the nesting site. Snakes can climb to almost any height, seeking the protein-rich eggs that represent easy meals. Koalas and other mammals are equally dangerous, using their climbing skills to access cavities that seem safely elevated. You maintain constant vigilance, ready to sound alarms and coordinate defensive responses. Your first encounter with an egg predator happens at dawn while you're away foraging. You return to find your mate agitated and calling frantically from the nest entrance. A large snake has managed to climb the tree and is investigating the cavity opening. You attack immediately, diving at the reptile with beak and talons extended. The snake is more dangerous than you anticipated. Instead of retreating, it coils and strikes, its fangs missing your head by inches. You're forced to use hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly then pulling back before it can retaliate. Your mate joins the attack from inside the cavity, snapping at the snake whenever it tries to enter the hollow. The battle lasts for nearly an hour before the snake finally gives up and slides back down the tree. You and your mate are exhausted but victorious, the eggs still safe in their nest. The incident reinforces how vulnerable your offspring will be and how constant your vigilance must remain throughout the breeding season. Incubation takes nearly a month, during which your mate rarely leaves the nest for more than a few minutes at a time. You develop efficient foraging routes that allow you to gather maximum nutrition in minimum time, rushing back to provide regular meals and brief periods of companionship. The isolation is difficult for both of you. Macaws are social creatures, and the demands of breeding restrict your interactions with the broader community. The first signs of hatching create intense excitement and anxiety. You hear faint tapping sounds from inside the eggs as the developing chicks begin using their egg teeth to break through the shells. Your mate becomes even more protective, barely allowing you near the nest as the hatching process unfolds. The first chick emerges after hours of struggling, wet and exhausted but alive. It's impossibly small and helpless, blind and nearly featherless, completely dependent on parental care for survival. A second chick hatches the following day, but the third egg never develops. After several more days, you remove the failed egg from the nest. Feeding the chicks becomes a full-time occupation for both parents. The young birds need constant nutrition to fuel their rapid growth, and their demands increase exponentially as they develop. You and your mate take turns hunting and feeding, working from dawn to dusk to keep up with their voracious appetites. The chicks grow with astonishing speed, their weight doubling every few days. Pin feathers begin emerging, giving them a hedgehog-like appearance. Before the actual plumage unfurls, their eyes open after about a week, revealing the intelligent awareness that will define their personalities as they mature. Competition between the chicks becomes apparent early. The first to hatch has a size advantage that translates into better access to food. It's more aggressive in demanding attention, pushing its sibling aside when you or your mate approaches with meals. You try to ensure both chicks get adequate nutrition, but natural selection operates even within the nest. Your territory becomes a war zone as other predators learn about the vulnerable chicks in your nest. You fight almost daily battles against hawks, owls, snakes, and mammals that see your offspring as potential meals. The constant stress of defending the nest while also providing food pushes you to your physical and emotional limits. The smaller chick struggles to compete with its larger sibling and eventually weakens despite your efforts to provide equal feeding opportunities. One morning, you find it motionless in the nest, another casualty of the harsh realities of wild reproduction. You remove the body and focus your efforts on ensuring the survival of the remaining chick. Your surviving offspring grows rapidly, developing the personality and physical characteristics that will define its adult life. It's curious and vocal, constantly calling for attention and food. Its feathers emerge in the brilliant colors that mark it as a scarlet macaw, though they're still soft and fluffy compared to the sleek plumage it will develop as an adult. The chick's appetite becomes enormous as it approaches fledgling age. It's nearly as large as its parents now, but still completely dependent on being fed. You and your mate work frantically to keep up with its demands, bringing back fruits, nuts, and other foods in a constant stream of parental effort. Teaching begins before the chick leaves the nest. You and your mate demonstrate proper feeding techniques, showing how to manipulate food with beak and feet. You practice vocalizations that the chick tries to copy, its voice cracking and squeaking as it attempts to match your complex calls. These early lessons will be crucial for its survival once it becomes independent. The first attempts at leaving the nest are terrifying for all involved. The chick is large enough and strong enough for flight, but it lacks experience and confidence. It perches at the nest entrance, flapping its wings and calling anxiously, clearly wanting to join you in the outside world, but afraid to take the crucial first step. You and your mate use food to encourage the chick's first flight. Instead of bringing meals directly to the nest, you perch on nearby branches with tempting fruits, calling encouragement, while the hungry chick struggles with the decision to leave safety for the unknown dangers of the forest canopy. The first flight is more of a controlled crash than graceful movement. The chick launches itself from the nest entrance with determination but little technique, wings flapping frantically as it tries to reach your perch. It overshoots the target, crashing into a tangle of leaves and vines before managing to right itself on a lower branch. Despite the rough landing, the chick has successfully fledged. It's no longer confined to the nest cavity, but it's still completely dependent on parental care. You and your mate continue feeding it regularly, while also beginning the long process of teaching it the skills needed for independent survival. Flight training becomes a daily activity as the young bird develops strength and coordination. You lead it on increasingly long journeys through the forest, teaching it to navigate between trees, land on specific branches, and use air currents efficiently. Its technique improves rapidly, though it's still clumsy compared to experienced adults. The young macaw's education expands beyond basic flight skills to include foraging, predator recognition, and social behavior. You show it which fruits are safe to eat and which should be avoided, how to crack tough nuts with maximum efficiency, and where to find the clay deposits that are essential for neutralizing dietary toxins. Predator awareness training is crucial for the chick's survival. You demonstrate proper responses to different types of threats, the freeze and hide reaction, appropriate for ground predators, the mobbing behavior used against aerial hunters, and the escape routes that provide safety when direct confrontation isn't possible. Your offspring shows natural talent for some skills while struggling with others. Its flying improves quickly, but it has difficulty with the fine motor control needed for efficient foraging. It can crack small nuts easily, but struggles with larger, tougher specimens that require precise positioning and maximum leverage. Social interactions with other macaws provide important lessons in community dynamics. You introduce the young bird to other families, allowing it to observe adult interactions and practice communication skills with peers. These encounters teach it about territorial boundaries, dominance hierarchies, and the complex social structures that govern macaw society. The gradual transition from dependence to independence is emotionally difficult for all family members. Your offspring still begs for food even when it's capable of feeding itself, and you and your mate struggle with the decision of when to stop providing easy meals and force the development of self-reliance. Competition with other young macaws helps accelerate your offspring's development. When forced to compete for food with birds its own age, it quickly learns to be more aggressive and efficient. These social pressures push it toward independence faster than parental teaching alone could accomplish. Your territory begins to feel crowded as your offspring reaches near adult size. 3. Large macaws in an area that comfortably supported 2 creates resource competition and social tension. The young bird needs to establish its own territory, but it lacks the experience and confidence to venture far from parental protection. The first extended solo flights mark the beginning of true independence. Your offspring disappears for hours at a time, exploring areas beyond your immediate territory, and learning to survive without constant parental supervision. These absences are nerve-wracking, but they're necessary steps toward adulthood. Weather challenges test your offspring's developing survival skills. When storms hit, it must find its own shelter rather than relying on your guidance. Its first major tempest is a trial by fire. You watch anxiously from your own secure perch as it struggles to find adequate protection from wind and rain. Food scarcity during the dry season forces your offspring to develop more sophisticated foraging strategies. It can no longer depend on you to locate the best feeding sites, instead, learning to read environmental cues that indicate ripening fruits and available resources. Its successes and failures during this period build the knowledge base it will need for lifelong survival. The social dynamics of your family unit shift as your offspring matures. It begins challenging your authority in minor ways, testing boundaries, and asserting its own preferences. These conflicts are natural parts of the independence process, but they create tension that makes eventual separation inevitable. Your mate shows signs of preparing for another breeding cycle. Her behavior toward the current offspring becomes less nurturing and more distant, her attention shifting toward potential new reproductive opportunities. The biological imperative to produce more offspring conflicts with continued investment in the current young bird. The final break comes gradually rather than suddenly. Your offspring spends longer periods away from the family territory, returning less frequently for food and social contact. Eventually, these absences become permanent departures, marking the end of the intensive parenting phase and your return to life as a mated pair without dependent offspring. You feel a complex mixture of pride and loss as your offspring disappears into the forest to establish its own life. The successful rearing of a young macaw to independence represents the ultimate achievement of your adult life, but it also means accepting that your relationship with this bird will never again be as close as it was during the dependent period. The territory that felt overcrowded with 3 occupants now seems empty with just 2. You and your mate have more resources available, but you also have more time to fill and less focused activity to occupy your days. The transition back to non-breeding behavior requires its own adjustments and adaptations. Your experience as a parent has changed you in fundamental ways. You're more confident in confrontations with other macaws, having successfully defended a nest and raised offspring to independence. Your knowledge of the forest is deeper and more practical, informed by the intensive resource gathering that successful breeding required. The cycle begins preparing to repeat itself as your mate shows renewed interest in courtship behaviors. The hollow that served as your first nest site is still available, though it will need cleaning and repair before it can be used again. Your success in previous breeding makes you more attractive to your mate and establishes your credentials as a reliable partner. But reproduction is becoming more challenging as human presence in the forest increases. Trees suitable for nesting are being cut down for agriculture and development. Food sources are becoming less reliable as forest fragments are isolated from each other. The skills that ensured your survival may not be sufficient for your offspring's generation. You notice changes in the forest that worry you, even though you lack the context to understand their broader implications. Familiar trees disappear overnight, replaced by open spaces that offer no shelter or food. Strange sounds echo through areas that were once quiet, and new smells taint the air with chemical odors you've never encountered. Other wildlife is disappearing as well. Species that were common during your youth are now rarely seen. The complex web of relationships that sustained forest life for millions of years is unraveling faster than evolution can adapt to the changes. Your offspring will inherit a world very different from the one that shaped your own development. Despite these challenges, life continues with its ancient rhythms. The sun still rises each day, fruits still ripen in their seasons, and the basic needs of survival still drive your daily activities. You've mastered the skills needed to thrive in your environment, and that mastery provides satisfaction regardless of external changes. Your relationship with your mate has deepened through shared challenges and successful reproduction. The bond that began with awkward courtship rituals has evolved into a partnership based on mutual respect, shared experience, and complementary abilities. You've learned to anticipate each other's needs and coordinate your activities with minimal communication. The forest remains beautiful despite the changes threatening its future. Each sunrise still paints the canopy in brilliant colors, and each sunset creates silhouettes that take your breath away. The simple pleasure of flying through this three-dimensional world, of feeling wind beneath your wings and sunlight on your feathers, remains as powerful as it was during your first tentative flights from the nest. You've achieved everything that evolution programmed you to accomplish: survival to adulthood, successful mating, territory establishment, and reproduction. Your genes will continue into the next generation through your offspring, ensuring that your particular combination of traits and abilities doesn't disappear from the world. In biological terms, you've been completely successful, but success in nature is always temporary, always conditional on continued adaptation to changing circumstances. The skills that brought you this far will be tested repeatedly as you age and as your environment continues to change. Each day still brings new challenges that require all your accumulated wisdom and experience to overcome. Your place in the forest community is now well established. Other macaws recognize you as an experienced adult with proven survival skills and successful breeding history. Younger birds sometimes follow you to productive feeding sites, learning from your example. Your calls carry authority that comes only from demonstrated competence in the challenges of wildlife. The future stretches ahead with both promise and uncertainty. You may have many more years of life, many more breeding cycles, many more offspring to raise and release into independence. Or you may face challenges that test your abilities beyond their limits. Either way, you've already contributed to the continuation of your species and justified your existence in the grand scheme of natural selection. For now, you simply continue living each day as it comes, applying the lessons learned through years of experience to the immediate challenges of survival. The forest that was once a mystery is now your home, its rhythms as familiar as your own heartbeat. You've become part of something larger than yourself, a living system that has persisted for millions of years and will hopefully continue long after your individual life ends. Your body begins to show the accumulated wear of years spent navigating the forest's demands. Your feathers, once uniformly brilliant, now show subtle signs of aging, slightly duller colors where the sun has faded them, small gaps where molting hasn't been quite as perfect as it once was. Your flight muscles are still strong, but they require more warm-up time on cold mornings, and recovery takes longer after particularly strenuous journeys. The joints in your wings ache during weather changes, a reliable predictor of approaching storms that serves as an early warning system. Your beak shows the nicks and scratches of countless encounters with tough nuts and rough bark, each mark a testament to survival challenges overcome. These physical changes don't significantly impair your abilities yet, but they remind you that time moves forward regardless of your wishes. Your territory has evolved over the years, shaped by changes both natural and human caused. Some of your favorite fruiting trees have fallen to storms or disease, forcing you to expand your foraging range to maintain adequate nutrition. New trees have matured to replace some losses, but the overall productivity of your territory has declined as development pressures increase around its borders. Water sources that were reliable throughout your adult life have become seasonal or disappeared entirely. Climate patterns are shifting in ways that make traditional migration timing less predictable. The environmental cues your species has relied on for thousands of generations are becoming unreliable, forcing you to adapt behaviors that evolution never prepared you for. Your mate shows similar signs of aging, though she handles the changes with the same stoic determination that has characterized her approach to every challenge. Your bond has deepened through years of shared experiences, creating a partnership that functions with remarkable efficiency despite the increasing difficulties you face together. The forest community around you is changing as well. Many of the macaws you've known throughout your adult life have disappeared, some to predation, others to disease, and increasing numbers to causes related to human activity. The social networks that once provided information and mutual support are fragmenting as population density declines. Younger macaws sometimes approach your territory, seeking the guidance that experienced pairs can provide. You find yourself in the role of elder statesman, your behavior watched and copied by birds, trying to learn the survival skills that once came more naturally. Teaching becomes an unexpected responsibility that you accept with mixed feelings. Your offspring from previous breeding seasons occasionally cross paths with you during migrations or at major feeding sites. These encounters are awkward. The family bonds that once defined your relationships have been severed by necessity, but some recognition remains. You observe their adult behaviors with a mixture of pride and concern, noting their successes and failures without being able to intervene. Some of your descendants have established territories near your own, creating a loose network of related birds that share information and occasionally coordinate responses to threats. Others have dispersed across vast distances, following migration routes that may take them hundreds of miles from their hatching site. You wonder about their fates, but have no way of knowing whether they've survived the challenges of independent life. Breeding becomes more challenging as you age. Your mate's egg production declines, and the eggs she does lay are less likely to develop successfully. The physical demands of incubation and chick rearing take a greater toll on both of you, requiring longer recovery periods between attempts. You're forced to be more selective about when and where to nest, choosing only the most favorable conditions for reproductive efforts. Your last successful breeding season produces a single chick that requires extraordinary effort to raise to independence. Both you and your mate push yourselves to the limits of your capabilities, gathering food from increasingly distant sources to meet the growing bird's enormous appetite. The experience is exhausting, but ultimately rewarding when the young macaw finally achieves independence. The decision to stop breeding comes gradually rather than suddenly. Your mate's interest in courtship behaviors wanes, and your own energy levels make the prospect of another intensive parenting period seem overwhelming. The biological drive that once dominated your behavior during breeding season becomes muted, replaced by a focus on simple survival and maintenance of your pair bond. Without the demands of reproduction, your daily routine becomes more flexible and less stressful. You can focus on your own nutrition and health rather than constantly providing for dependent offspring. Your territory feels more spacious without the need to defend nesting sites, and your social interactions become more relaxed without the competitive pressures of breeding season. The forest reveals new aspects of its character as you age, with more time available for observation and less pressure to constantly search for food. You notice subtle patterns and relationships that escaped your attention during your busier years. The interconnections between different species become more apparent, as does the delicate balance that maintains forest ecosystem health. Your flying style adapts to your changing physical capabilities. Where once you relied on speed and agility, you now emphasize efficiency and conservation of energy. Your route planning becomes more sophisticated, taking advantage of thermals and wind patterns to minimize the physical effort required for long distance travel. Experience compensates for declining raw physical ability. Weather events that once seemed manageable now pose greater challenges. Storms that you could have weathered easily in your prime require more careful preparation and shelter seeking. Temperature extremes affect you more strongly, forcing adjustments to your daily activity patterns and roosting site selection. Your social status within the macaw community shifts as you transition from active breeder to elder member. Younger birds no longer see you as direct competition for mates or prime territories, allowing for more peaceful interactions. Your calls carry the authority of experience, and other macaws often defer to your knowledge when making decisions about feeding sites or migration timing. The loss of friends and familiar faces becomes a regular part of life. Birds you've known for years simply stop appearing at traditional gathering sites, their fates unknown but probably predictable. Each disappearance reminds you of your own mortality, while also reducing the social richness that once made forest life more enjoyable. Human activity continues to encroach on your territory, despite your best efforts to avoid contact. The sounds of machinery become more frequent, and the smell of smoke from clearing fires taints the air with increasing regularity. Strange lights appear at night, where once there was only darkness, and unfamiliar structures that alter familiar landscapes. Your responses to human presence become more sophisticated as you learn to distinguish between different types of threats. Some humans seem harmless, content to observe from a distance without interfering with your activities. Others carry weapons or equipment that clearly mark them as dangerous. You develop strategies for avoiding the latter while tolerating the former. Food sources become less reliable as your territory fragments and changes. Trees that provided abundant nutrition for years are suddenly gone, replaced by human structures or agricultural crops that offer no sustenance. You're forced to travel greater distances to find adequate nutrition, testing your aging body's endurance limits. The clay licks that are essential for your health become more dangerous to visit as human activity increases around them. What were once peaceful mineral gathering sites now require careful reconnaissance and quick feeding sessions to avoid potentially fatal encounters. The stress of these visits adds to your overall health burden. Sleep becomes more elusive as age and environmental pressures combine to increase your anxiety levels. The light sleeping that once allowed you to detect threats while still getting adequate rest now leaves you chronically tired. Your reaction times slow accordingly, making you more vulnerable to predators and accidents. Your mate's health begins to decline more noticeably than your own. She moves more slowly, feeds less efficiently, and shows less interest in the social activities that once brought her pleasure. Your role shifts from equal partner to primary caregiver, though you're careful to maintain her dignity by not being overly protective. Memory becomes both more and less reliable as you age. Your long-term recollections of important events, locations, and relationships remain crystal clear, but short-term memory sometimes fails you. You might forget whether you've already fed at a particular tree or have difficulty remembering the exact sequence of landmarks on familiar routes. The changing forest forces you to constantly update your mental maps and behavioral patterns. Routes that were safe for decades become dangerous due to human activity or habitat changes. Food sources that were reliable for years suddenly fail, requiring rapid adaptation to new foraging strategies. Your physical condition fluctuates more dramatically than it did in your prime. Good days allow you to fly long distances and engage in complex activities with something approaching your former capability. Bad days leave you barely able to maintain basic functions, forcing you to rest and conserve energy for essential survival tasks. Predator threats evolve as your capabilities decline. Hawks and other aerial hunters that once posed manageable risks now represent serious dangers due to your reduced speed and agility. You develop new defensive strategies based on stealth and caution rather than speed and confrontation. The seasonal migrations that once were routine adventures now require careful planning and gradual execution. You can no longer maintain the pace that younger birds set, forcing you to take longer routes with more rest stops. Sometimes you arrive at traditional sites after the best feeding opportunities have been exhausted by earlier arrivals. Your relationship with your territory becomes more sentimental as practical considerations force change in your behavior patterns. Areas that hold emotional significance may no longer be practical to visit regularly, but you continue to include them in your routes when possible. These locations serve as anchors to your past and reminders of better times. The forest's soundscape changes as species disappear and human noise increases. The dawn chorus that once included dozens of bird species becomes dominated by a few hardy survivors. Mechanical sounds intrude on the natural rhythms that have guided your behavior throughout your life. Your interactions with younger macaws become teaching opportunities rather than competitive encounters. When approached by inexperienced birds seeking guidance, you find yourself demonstrating techniques and sharing knowledge that took you years to acquire. These exchanges provide purpose and social connection that partially compensate for other losses. Disease becomes a more serious concern as your immune system weakens with age. Minor infections that would have been easily overcome in your prime now require significant recovery time. You become more cautious about exposure to sick birds and contaminated food sources. The simple pleasures that once brought joy become more precious as they become less frequent. A perfect flight through morning mist, the taste of a particularly sweet fruit, the comfort of preening with your mate, these experiences gain intensity as their availability becomes less certain. Your mate's condition continues to deteriorate, and you find yourself spending more time caring for her and less time attending to your own needs. The partnership that has sustained you both for years becomes increasingly one-sided, though your commitment to her welfare never wavers. The forest canopy that was once your highway becomes an obstacle course requiring careful navigation. Branches that you could once thread through at high speed now require slow, careful approach. Your three-dimensional world becomes more constrained as your physical limitations force route modifications. Weather sensitivity increases to the point where minor changes in barometric pressure affect your comfort and mobility. You learn to read atmospheric cues with greater precision, adjusting your activities to minimize exposure to conditions that might overwhelm your aging body. Your voice changes as age affects your vocal apparatus. The powerful calls that once carried for miles become weaker and less resonant. Communication requires more effort and closer proximity, reducing your effective social range and making long-distance coordination more difficult. Foraging efficiency declines as your beak strength diminishes and your manipulation skills become less precise. Nuts that you once cracked effortlessly now require multiple attempts or must be abandoned entirely. Your diet shifts towards softer foods that require less processing effort. The territory that once felt manageable now seems vast and challenging. Areas that you could visit daily in your prime become weekly or monthly destinations. Your effective range contracts around core areas that provide essential resources with minimal travel requirements. Sleep requirements increase as your body needs more time to recover from daily activities. The brief rest periods that once sufficed now must be extended, reducing the time available for foraging and social activities. Finding safe, comfortable roosting sites becomes a higher priority. Your mate passes away during a particularly cold night, her aged body finally succumbing to the accumulated stresses of forest life. You find her motionless beside you at dawn, her feathers still beautiful, but her eyes closed forever. The loss is devastating, not just emotionally, but practically, as you must now face the challenges ahead without your longtime partner. Grief affects you in ways you didn't expect. Food loses its appeal, flight becomes mechanical rather than joyful, and the territory you shared feels empty and pointless. You continue the routines of survival, but the motivation that once drove you has been significantly diminished by the loss of your closest companion. Loneliness becomes a constant presence as you adjust to solitary life after years of partnership. The absence of your mate's calls, her presence during feeding, and the comfort of shared roosting creates a void that affects every aspect of your daily existence. You find yourself calling out occasionally, hoping for a response that will never come. The practical challenges of solo survival become apparent as your capabilities continue to decline. Tasks that were manageable with two birds become difficult or impossible for one aging macaw. Your foraging efficiency drops further as you can no longer coordinate activities or share information about food sources. Other macaws in the area show some sympathy for your situation, occasionally allowing you to feed in their territories without the aggressive confrontations that would normally occur. These acts of tolerance provide crucial access to resources when your own territory proves insufficient for your needs. Your daily routine simplifies as energy conservation becomes the primary consideration. Non-essential activities are eliminated, flight distances are minimized, and rest periods are extended. The rich, complex life you once lived contracts to focus on basic survival needs. The forest around you continues to change, but your ability to adapt to those changes diminishes with each passing season. New threats emerge that you lack the energy or capability to address effectively. Environmental challenges that would have been manageable in your prime now pose existential threats. Your final seasons are marked by increasing difficulty with basic survival tasks. Flight becomes labored and limited to short distances. Foraging requires enormous effort for minimal nutrition. Weather events that once were minor inconveniences now threaten your survival. The morning comes when you lack the strength to leave your roosting site. Your body, worn out by years of meeting the forest's demands, finally reaches the limits of its endurance. You rest quietly in the tree that has been your shelter, watching the sun rise one last time over the forest canopy that has been your world. The forest continues its ancient rhythms around you as your breathing slows and eventually stops. Other birds continue their daily activities. The wind still moves through the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, young macaws are learning the lessons that will carry them through their own journeys from birth to death. Your body will nourish the soil that feeds the trees that provide shelter and food for future generations of macaws. The territory you defended and the knowledge you accumulated will pass to other birds who will face their own versions of the challenges you overcame. The cycle that brought you into existence continues, ensuring that something of your legacy persists even after your individual story ends. Life as a macaw might be demanding, but there's another creature out there that faces even greater challenges. Trust me, it's incredible. Check out the video and see for yourself. Your body will nourish the soil that feeds the trees that provide shelter and food for future generations of macaws. The territory you defended and the knowledge you accumulated will pass to other birds who will face their own versions of the challenges you overcame. The cycle that brought you into existence continues, ensuring that something of your legacy persists even after your individual story ends. Your offspring, scattered across vast distances, carry forward the genetic legacy you've passed down through successful reproduction. Some have established their own territories and raised their own young, continuing the bloodline that stretches back through countless generations. Others may have fallen to the same dangers that eventually claimed you, but their attempts at survival honored the lessons you taught them during those crucial early months. The forest itself bears the subtle marks of your lifetime presence. Trees you helped pollinate through your feeding activities have produced offspring that now tower above the canopy. Seeds you dispersed through your travels have grown into the fruiting trees that sustain current macaw populations. Your existence rippled through the ecosystem in ways both visible and invisible, contributing to the complex web of relationships that keeps the forest alive. The hollow where you raised your chicks remains available for future nesting pairs, your careful maintenance and improvements making it more suitable for reproduction than when you first claimed it. Young macaws discovering this cavity will benefit from your modifications without ever knowing who prepared their nursery. The knowledge of its location and suitability will spread through the macaw community, ensuring its continued use. Other birds learned from watching your behaviors throughout your lifetime. The foraging techniques you perfected, the flight routes you established, the threat responses you demonstrated, all became part of the collective knowledge that helps the species survive. Your individual discoveries and adaptations contributed to the broader intelligence that allows macaws to thrive in an increasingly challenging environment. The social networks you participated in continue to function, though your voice no longer adds to their conversations. The information exchanges at roosting sites, the coordinated responses to predators, the shared knowledge about seasonal resources, these systems persist because birds like you contributed to their development and maintenance throughout your active years. Your territory gradually transitions to new occupants who will face their own struggles for survival and reproduction. The boundaries you established through years of conflict and negotiation will shift as new residents assert their own claims. The resources you protected will sustain different families, but the fundamental patterns of territorial behavior will remain unchanged. The clay licks you frequented still provide essential minerals for surviving macaws, though their accessibility continues to decline as human activity increases around them. The routes you pioneered to reach these crucial resources may guide other birds to safety, your flight paths becoming part of the traditional knowledge that helps maintain population health. Weather patterns continue their ancient cycles, bringing the seasonal changes that shaped your entire existence. The rains still trigger fruit production, the dry seasons still force long-distance migrations, and storms still test the survival skills of every forest resident. These natural rhythms persist regardless of individual lifespans, providing the framework within which each generation must learn to survive. The predators that threatened you throughout your life continue hunting new generations of macaws, maintaining the selective pressures that have shaped your species for millions of years. Hawks still patrol the canopy, snakes still raid nests, and mammals still pose threats to unwary birds. These dangers ensure that only the most capable individuals survive to reproduce, preserving the genetic fitness of the population. Human encroachment on the forest accelerates despite your lifetime of avoiding contact with these strange bipedal creatures. The sounds of machinery grow louder, the lights at night become brighter, and the fragments of remaining habitat become smaller and more isolated. Future generations of macaws will face challenges that would have been unimaginable during your youth. Climate patterns shift in ways that make traditional survival strategies less reliable. The fruiting cycles you learn to predict become more erratic, migration timing becomes less certain, and weather extremes become more frequent and severe. Your descendants will need to adapt to environmental changes that occur faster than evolutionary processes can accommodate. Disease pressures evolve as wildlife populations become more stressed and fragmented. Pathogens that once posed manageable threats become more virulent as immune systems weaken under environmental pressure. The health challenges facing future macaws may exceed anything your generation experienced, yet life persists with the same determination that carried you through decades of forest existence. New chicks still hatch in hidden hollows, still learn to fly despite their fears, still master the complex skills needed for independent survival. The fundamental drives that motivated your own journey, hunger, safety, reproduction, territory, continue to shape behavior in each new generation. Young macaws still experience the wonder of their first flights, the satisfaction of cracking their first nuts, the terror of their first predator encounters. The emotional landscape of macaw existence remains unchanged despite the evolving challenges. Fear and joy, success and failure, companionship and loneliness. These experiences connect your story to every other macaw that has ever lived. The forest canopy still provides the three-dimensional highways that make macaw life possible, though the network becomes more fragmented with each passing year. The ancient trees that supported your parents and grandparents continue to offer shelter and food, though their numbers decline as development pressures intensify. Seasonal migrations still follow routes established over countless generations, though the destinations may change as habitat loss forces adaptations. The navigational skills you developed through trial and error are still essential for survival, though the landmarks you memorized may no longer exist for future travelers. Social structures within macaw communities persist despite changing population densities and habitat fragmentation. Dominance hierarchies still determine access to resources. Pair bonds still form through elaborate courtship rituals, and territorial disputes still resolve through displays of strength and determination. The calls that echo through the forest still carry the same meanings they held during your lifetime. Alarm calls still warn of danger, contact calls still maintain social connections, and courtship songs still facilitate pair formation. The vocal traditions of your species continue unbroken, linking past and future through shared communication systems. Food webs continue to connect macaws to the broader ecosystem, though the relationships become more strained as species diversity declines. The fruits you ate still depend on the same pollination and dispersal services that macaws provide, creating mutual dependencies that have sustained both plants and animals for millions of years. Nesting cavities remain the critical limiting factor for reproduction, though suitable sites become increasingly rare as old trees fall and are not replaced. The competition for these essential resources intensifies as available options dwindle, forcing adaptations in behavior and habitat use. The beauty that made your flights through the forest canopy so memorable persists in the play of light through leaves, the symphony of sounds from countless species, and the ever-changing palette of colors that marks the passage of seasons. These aesthetic experiences continue to enrich the lives of surviving macaws, providing moments of transcendence amid the struggle for survival. Your story represents just one thread in the vast tapestry of life that has woven itself through millions of years of evolution. The experiences you accumulated, the challenges you overcame, and the legacy you left behind are simultaneously unique to your individual existence and representative of the broader patterns that define life itself. The forest will continue its ancient rhythms long after the last echoes of your calls have faded. New generations of macaws will face their own versions of the trials that shaped your journey, armed with the genetic heritage and learned behaviors that your generation contributed to the species' survival toolkit. The cycle begins anew as another generation of eggs develops in hidden cavities throughout the forest. Fresh chicks crack through shells with the same determination you once showed, their tiny beaks working instinctively to break free from the safety that has become a prison. The forest that witnessed your entire life story now prepares to shape new stories, each one unique, yet following the same fundamental patterns that have sustained your species for countless millennia. Somewhere in the canopy, a young macaw makes its first tentative flight from the nest, wings beating frantically as it attempts to bridge the gap between branches. Its landing is just as clumsy as yours once was, but like you, it will learn. The skills that took you years to master will be acquired by this new generation through the same process of trial and error, success and failure that has always defined the transition from helpless chick to competent adult. The knowledge you accumulated through decades of experience has become part of the forest's collective memory. Other macaws witnessed your techniques, learned from your successes, and avoided the mistakes that cost you dearly. This information flows through the community in ways both obvious and subtle, ensuring that hard-won wisdom doesn't die with the individuals who acquired it. But the forest itself is changing in ways that make your accumulated knowledge less relevant with each passing season. The reliable fruiting cycles you learned to predict are becoming erratic as climate patterns shift beyond historical norms. The safe routes you established through the canopy are being severed by development that fragments the landscape into isolated patches. Young macaws entering the world today face challenges that would have been unimaginable during your youth. They must learn to navigate around human settlements that didn't exist when you were learning to fly. They must adapt to noise levels that mask the subtle sounds their parents use for communication. They must find food in a landscape where many traditional sources have simply vanished. Yet adaptation continues because it must. Some individuals discover new food sources that older generations overlooked. Others develop novel strategies for avoiding human contact while still accessing the resources they need for survival. The most successful pioneers will pass these innovations to their offspring, gradually shifting the species' behavioral repertoire to match changing conditions. The genetic legacy you contributed through successful reproduction carries forward the traits that allowed you to thrive in your particular environment. Your offspring inherited your beak strength, your flight capabilities, your intelligence, and countless other characteristics that prove their worth through the test of survival. These genes will combine with others in new configurations, creating individuals equipped to face whatever challenges await. But genes alone cannot ensure survival in a rapidly changing world. The learned behaviors that prove so crucial to your success must be transmitted culturally from experienced birds to naive ones. This knowledge transfer becomes more difficult as population densities decline and social networks fragment, yet it remains essential for species persistence. The forest ecosystem that supported your entire existence continues to function despite mounting pressures. Trees still photosynthesize sunlight into energy. Fruits still ripen according to their internal schedules, and the complex web of relationships between species still maintains the balance that makes life possible. But this balance grows more precarious as human activities disrupt natural processes. Your story ends, but the story of your species continues. Somewhere in the vast green expanse that was your world, macaws are still being born, still learning to survive, still facing the eternal challenges of finding food, avoiding predators, and raising the next generation. The forest that shaped you will shape them too, though it may look very different from the world you knew. The sun that warmed your feathers each morning still rises over the canopy, still triggers the daily rhythms that govern forest life. Birds still greet the dawn with calls that have echoed through these trees for millions of years. The fundamental patterns of existence persist even as the details shift and change. Life as a macaw might be challenging, but there's another creature out there that has it way worse. Trust me, it's wild. Check out the video and see for yourself.